Today's interview is with Bailey Kramer. Bailey's a young guy just starting out in his real estate investing career. He talks about how Rich Dad Poor Dad changed his life and the trajectory of his life, and then how he got into bigger pockets. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from Bailey. Even though he's so young, I took a lot of notes on today's interview. He talks about networking, how he's able to grow his network, some networking tips, along with some social media stuff. So it's a really good interview. Stick around to the end so you guys can learn a lot. I know I did. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE Podcast and write me a 5-star rating. Give me a 5-star rating and write me a review if you think it's worthy. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate, wherever you are in your career, I'd love to get to know you, see if there's any way I can help you whatsoever. There's going to be a link in the description below, or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, the website, and sign up there. But before that, enjoy today's great interview with Bailey.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we have Bailey Kramer with me. Hey Bailey, how you doing, man?
Hey Barry, I'm doing phenomenal. Super excited for the interview.
Oh, cool. I'm excited too. It's going to be a fun one. I can tell already from the conversation we had beforehand. Before we dive into today's conversation, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and what your current focus is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, where do I start, right? So to give a quick background, I am a junior in college right now, studying real estate in Orlando. Real estate out of all things, right? And you know, the quick story, I got into real estate like many other people, and that's through the famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Super cliche. I'm sure everyone's nodding their head right now. Oh, I've read that. That's what got me into it. That was the first thing for me. And really from there, hopped on over to Bigger Pockets. And it's funny that now that I kind of went through this and talked to other people, some of the parts of the story start to line up with others, which is just kind of a funny coincidence. But yeah, Bigger Pockets was that first stepping stone into education. I listened to, hours and hours of their podcast during the day, during class, on my way home from class, you name it, in the shower. Like I was listening and consuming knowledge. That was a few months worth of consuming information. And it was more than just the Bigger Pockets podcast. It was books, it was webinars, but Bigger Pockets definitely played a huge role. Fast forward a little bit more, I kept finding out about new asset classes. I heard that there's a duplex, there's a triplex, you can do apartment complexes, office, all these different assets that I didn't even know were possible for people to invest in before I got into all of this. So that's what got me excited about multifamily. I realized, housing isn't too hard to understand. Everyone lives somewhere. So, everyone either grew up in a single family house, maybe an apartment complex, wherever it may be. That's how I grew up, right? So I understood people need housing. And then when I found out about multifamily, it was an instant light bulb moment. It's kind of like single family, but a lot more scalable and a lot more efficient. It just makes more mathematical sense, right? So that was, literally a few months into the learning process, I learned about multifamily. And that's, like I said, the light bulb. And from there, I went into full networking mode, full education mode, strictly multifamily. And I've just been learning, networking, and just building that way ever since. And now I'm kind of on my pathway to get into that first deal. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think, like you talked about there, Bigger Pockets is huge. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad everyone talks about, but I feel like Bigger Pockets is becoming the new Rich Dad Poor Dad. Obviously, it's not a book, but that gateway into the real estate investing, because it's such a phenomenal forum, right? They have blogs, they have the forum where you can go ask any question, what you want, watch whichever, and people are going to be there answering that question with you.
Right.
experienced people there. And then you've got the podcast, which is just, I love it. They're just producing more and more content. You've got the live videos that they do pretty much every day. It's just a phenomenal tool for anyone that's listening to this now that hasn't, is just starting, hasn't gone to Bigger Pockets. Just type in biggerpockets.com and welcome to the world. You'll be blown away.
Unbelievable resource. Unbelievable.
Right? Yeah, it'll just be like blow your brain out with that information. That's really cool. But so what do you think it was though that made you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Because what brought you to Rich Dad Poor Dad? What brought you to Bigger Pockets? Because you could have decided you were going to invest in stocks. You could have not decided you were going to invest in anything, right? You're a young guy. You could have just decided, I'm going to go drinking every weekend and spend every last penny I have. How did that happen?
Right. Well, ever since I was a kid, ever since I could remember, I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I think it started with seeing what my parents do, and I take so much positives away from my parents, and then always seeing, what do I admire and what do I, maybe would want to change, at least for myself. And one of those big things were, my parents are in the W-2 jobs, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But some of the things that come with that include, the time restrictions, a lot of just restrictions, right? That come with just any W-2 job, really. So that was, I think, one big factor. I knew that I wanted time freedom, out of all things, I wanted to be where I want, when I want, how I want. So that's kind of like the cliche saying, but seriously, I wanted to be able to control where I am. And that's kind of where the entrepreneurial, I was like, entrepreneurial, start my own business, kind of be in charge. And obviously it's not just glamorous, just like that, but the simple idea of, you have your own company, you are telling yourself what to do, and you're the determination of whether you succeed or not. So that just clicked on to me ever since I was a kid. The show Shark Tank was definitely a huge part of it as well. I see all these cool ideas. And like I said, real estate's within the past year for me. Before this, it was just entrepreneurship. I love just creation, innovation, that type of thing. But to answer your question, last December when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was just in my apartment, and I'm always just hungry to learn. So I looked up on the internet personal finance books, and I kept on looking at lists. It was like top 100, top 200, top 20. And the one book that I saw over and over again was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I said, okay. And the craziest thing to me, the book is like $5 on Amazon. So for those of you who are listening right now, if you have not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it'll be the best $5 investment you've ever made in your life. If it was $100, I would still buy it. So that's really what got me into it. I was just hungry to learn. I saw this thing popping up over and over again, and Rich Dad Poor Dad it was, and read that book, sent a copy to my brother, made my roommates read it. I was just blown away by this book, and that was really the start for me.
That book is so interesting to me because it's nothing complicated, right? That book is so simplistic, right? And it's
exactly.
But time and time again, and maybe people who haven't read it are sick of hearing it on this show, and I'm sure on your show as well, right? It's, that one book is such a common theme throughout real estate investing. I think what it is for most of us who don't understand, because we don't grow up understanding assets and liabilities,
right?
And, how one pathway can lead to one life and another pathway can lead to another life. We don't think we realize this, and that book just simply explains that. It's not a real estate book, right? And it's not really a business book because it doesn't explain too much about business. It's just that aha moment of, wait, I buy a car and it costs me money, or I can buy an investment property that makes me money.
Right.
I can buy an Apple Watch that, it doesn't do anything for me, or I can, invest in something that makes money for me. And it's like, wow.
Yeah,
it really is. It's that wow moment.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the book, because it is so simple. Anybody can really read it and understand. I mean, they have pictures, and the pictures are little diagrams, but it's a simple arrow. It is, if you spend money, this is where it goes. If you invest money, this is where it goes. And it's like, well, obviously I know what happens when I invest money, but when it talks about the balance sheet and your assets and your liabilities and your income statement, and you see it in this book, it's a whole nother level. It's really insane, these little charts that they have.
Yeah. No, the book is awesome. The funny thing about the book is I found as well is though, it's got to reach a person at the right time, or they've got to be willing to you mentioned that you had that entrepreneurial spirit and that you were interested in that from an early age, right? If you're not interested in it and you're one of those people that, I don't know, it just doesn't speak to you. I've had friends that I've made them read it, right? Because I'm sure like you're like, this is amazing. I want my friends to be on this journey with me and I want them to have a better life. And I had a friend who read it and he was like, oh yeah, that was a cool story, that guy and his dad, and then he kind of had another dad. I'm like, yeah, but what did they kind of teach you? Oh, that he kind of had two dads. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, kind of, but that's not the point of the book. And it was and there's someone else, something similar. And unless you're willing to be open to what that book is teaching you, it won't hit you, and a lot of people aren't, I think. But, I think it's interesting that you've got to be open to what that book's teaching is, I think.
Right. But something I know for almost fact, the people who are spending their time listening to podcasts like yours, shows like yours, they're already way ahead of the game, like way ahead of the game. The fact that they're even just listening to a podcast, reading a book, I can already predict that those are the people that would be, interested in the book and would understand it more than someone who just kind of picks it up, because the people who are already hungry, that book will touch them.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So then you mentioned you looked into Bigger Pockets and you started looking at when you started reading that, what did you think and consuming that information? Where did you think that you talk now that you're a multifamily? Where did you think that you were going to go at that point? What was your goal for real estate investing initially?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this changed 100 different times, 50 days straight, because the thing was when people hear real estate investing, especially when you're not in the industry, I think most people think a single family house. Mm-hmm. That was what I thought. And from speaking to probably hundreds, if not thousands of people at this point, that's what most people started with, because that's kind of what they knew. That's just real estate. Oh, single family. And then you kind of learn, but you're able to, go other ways. But so originally it was single family. I thought that I was going to have, X amount of single family homes and I was going to scale that way. So that was like, a group of podcasts there talking about single families. Then the next week I learned about a duplex and I was like, oh, I could scale double as fast as I was going to if I went single family, and literally went like that. Then triplexes and then quadplex. And it literally scaled like that. And one thing that was huge was there was a webinar on Bigger Pockets. And I just want to say too, there's nothing wrong with going single family. There's nothing wrong with having 100 single families. There is, what it all comes down to is personal goals, lifestyle choices. There's so many factors that go into it. So I just want to say there's no right or wrong investment to make. So I just want to put that out too. But I was watching Brandon Turner's webinar that he had, and it was, I think he called it 7 years to 7 figures. And basically it was a plan of, you start with one single family house this year, 2 the next year, 3, you kind of just add 1, maybe multiply here and there. But something about it didn't click with me. Like when I heard about multifamily, it clicked, and it's a feeling that I can't really describe. But if you've had a feeling about clicking with anything, or that light bulb moment, you would know it, like you'd understand. But something about this webinar didn't click with me. It didn't get me excited. It wasn't that light bulb moment. I knew that there had to be a different, faster way, at least in number of units, because what it was all about is how to get to 7 figures and get this amount of units. And I just knew from that standpoint, there had to be a more efficient way to get there. So that just got me to dig a little bit more and more and more. Yeah,
very cool. And what do you think it was about multifamily that had that light bulb moment for you? Because like you said, it's so true. You can invest. There's multi-millionaires in people who invest in just single families, and multi-millionaires in people who just do flips. As whatever it is, you can be successful in what you want, right? But it's like you said, it's that personal choice and what fits you as a person. And what do you think it was about multifamily that fitted you and was a good fit for you?
Yeah. So one of my huge limiting beliefs at the time was I don't have any money. And that's so common for everybody. I don't have money. I can't get started. So when I was learning about real estate, I realized that I didn't have enough money for a single family. If I were to make a 20% down payment, if I were to make a 3% down payment, I would have to be driving Uber for a few weeks, which again, nothing wrong with that. That's definitely a way to get into it. But I just didn't have the cash to like next day go around and buy something. So I would have had to do some work, which is, totally awesome and fine. But I knew I just didn't have that cash up front, right? So I was saying to myself, if I don't have the cash for single family and I don't have the cash for multifamily, I might as well just go with the asset class that I think is better. For whatever reasons I think it's better, I thought multifamily was better. And some of the reasons that I had was scalability. You can close one deal and have 100 units at the end, or you can have one unit at the end. That was one big thing. Another huge factor of it was the networking piece. And we can get into that a little bit later as well. But, talking to hundreds and hundreds of people and learning from their mistakes and their regrets and what they wish they did, that also was a huge factor. And all right, I think multifamily is the way to go for me. And, definitely a ton of limiting beliefs and ton of things to get through. But ultimately I think multifamily was a stronger asset class as far as scalability. And I don't have the ability to just go out and invest in a single family anyways, which probably benefited me. And for those people listening, don't let that be a limiting factor. Oh, I don't have money, I can't get started. I personally use that as, oh, this is great. I don't have to just be forced in this bubble because I have $20,000 I can just throw on this property. It was, all right, I have next to nothing, and now let me see what I want to do and then chase that.
That's cool. I like how you look at that, because most people will be like, I don't have money. That's a negative thing, but you look at it as a positive.
Right.
And I can see that as well, because sometimes if you have money, and I'm not talking about millions, but if you have $100,000 to invest, well, it's kind of easy then, right? Not easy, but you have that money to invest. You can buy a single family or two single families or whatever. You can buy something. So you don't have to, work hard and figure stuff out. It's just there. You go on the MLS, you find something that you think works, and then you end up buying it. It almost becomes a little bit lazy. Whereas if you don't have that money, you've got to bust your ass and figure out how to make it work. What can I do? What can I do to provide value? And figure it out there. And once you figure that out, how to do it without money, well, the possibilities are endless then, because you need money to do every deal. Well, you're limited by the amount of money that you have. But if you're not limited by that, well, the world's your oyster, right? And there's no ceiling to stop you from growing. And I think
exactly.
That's great that you realized that. I think that's
I appreciate that. And then one more thing to throw in as well was money was a huge part of it, but also the team aspect from single family to multifamily was another thing that intrigued me, because single family, although yes, you need a team involved. You're going to need a realtor. You're going to need, someone with the money. You're going to need someone with the knowledge of renovations. There's definitely a lot of aspects that go into it. But when we're talking multifamily, this is not a solo job by any means. And anyone that's in it solo, I haven't met anybody in it solo personally. So realizing that it wasn't a solo job and you didn't have to bring everything to the table, whereas single family, you can totally get by just doing everything yourself in terms of, you're in charge of the renovation. Do you find the deal? A lot of just smaller scale stuff. But if you're talking multifamily, you're not doing all the different tasks. So I realized that in my strength as well. Well, money's a part of it. Finding the deals is part of it. There's so many different parts of it. Boots on the ground is part of it. So I realized, okay, money's not going to be my thing. I'll just fit in somewhere else. I'll find out where I'm going to fit. And that was definitely another thing. So for the listeners out there, both team sports, don't get me wrong, but multifamily is a mandatory team sport.
It is. I was just talking to someone earlier about that. The exact same thing is that you can't play football by yourself, right? You need whatever it is, 14 other players or however much is on a football team. I don't know. I'm a soccer guy, so. But however many players are on a team, you've got to have those players, right? Tom Brady is not out there by himself. He could never win a football game by himself. You need all these positions in there, and you can be a position on that field, and you're all going to win together, and it's impossible to do it by yourself. I think that's such an important, because it's like you said, single family. I can buy a single family right tomorrow if I have the cash, and I do all the work myself. I manage it myself, blah, 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 and I'm just reliant on myself.
Right.
The large multi-family, like you can have other people, right? You don't need to understand everything, right? You just need to be able to do what you're doing in part of that team. So if your part is underwriting, you don't need to know about operations. You need to understand it somewhat, but you don't need to understand capital raising maybe. You don't need to understand how to speak to brokers. You don't need to understand how to get the debt financing on the property, right? You don't need to. Your job is to understand underwriting, and just be good at that, and rely on other team members to do that. So I think it gives you that confidence to do that, because you're using those other people's experience and those other people's expertise as well. I think
exactly.
I think that's really, I love that about multifamily as well. You mentioned earlier that you've been networking, right? And you've been talking to hundreds. How have you been networking? How did you start out networking?
Yeah, and this is by far the biggest piece I could stress, the networking piece, because you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't know a single soul, you're not going to be anywhere. And the people that are most successful in real estate that I've met, they're not necessarily the smartest people. A lot of them, I met people who don't even have, certain degrees, or they haven't even read a real estate book. I think those things are really helpful. And I'm honestly shocked to hear some of these people, like the little education that they have. Obviously they have a lot of experience and they built it up that way. But the one thread that I found between every successful real estate investor is the networking piece. So the way I started with my networking, again, I came from a network of literally 0 people. So after the Bigger Pockets, spree, the podcast spree that I was on, just consuming information, when I finally said, all right, multifamily is the way to go, I went on Bigger Pockets, and they have a messaging feature. And you can message anybody on the platform. And there are thousands of people. So this is exactly what I did. I typed in multifamily as a keyword, and anyone who had the words multifamily in their bio, in their anything, popped up. And it gave me the people who are most engaged, the most popular. So the most engaged, the people who are networking the most, right? So I took a list of those people. I think there was about 20 people that I initially messaged, and I sent them a long, awfully written message. And I'm not bragging that it was poorly written, but I do want to emphasize it doesn't matter. This is a huge lesson I learned as well, is it doesn't have to be the perfectly written message. You don't have to have the perfect profile picture. Nothing has to be perfect here. You just have to do it. So I sent a long message, and I look back at it sometimes and I start laughing, honestly. But I was saying, I'd like you to be my mentor. I'd love to, just stuff that you don't just say right away when you haven't met them, you haven't talked to them, like just silly stuff like that. But at the end of the day, most people replied to me. Out of the 20-ish people that I messaged, 15 replied. And not only that, people were asking to get on the phone calls with me. And I was asking to get on the phone calls with them as well. But a key takeaway from that is, and that I've learned from these past months and months of networking, is people in the real estate industry want to network. They want to talk. They want to help. So the first person I talked to was a guy named Bruce Peterson. So I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's a syndicator down in Texas. He's known as the apartment guy. Super awesome guy, and a really successful real estate investor. And I didn't know who he was at the time. And now looking at him, I wouldn't think that someone of his experience and his knowledge would take the time to chat with me, but he hopped on a phone call. I learned from him. I just asked him some questions. Like, what do you do? I didn't even fully understand what a syndicator was, but I wanted to just learn. And from that 30-minute phone call, I learned so much. And then I would get another phone call, another phone call. So the very start was bigger pockets, and it was just from reaching out to people who were doing things or really just had the keywords of things that I wanted to do. So that was the very start.
That's cool. Yeah. I think all of us will be surprised, me included, that how giving people are, right? When I started this YouTube channel and podcast, I was like, who's going to want to be on my show, right? These guys are busy, they're successful, I'm just starting out. But it's amazing. Almost, it has to be a 90% yes rate, people are always wanting to give their time and share their experiences and try and help. And it's just amazing to me that, yes, you have snakes, and yes, you have liars, and yes, you have people that, they'll take your last penny if you give them a chance. But for the most part, the people that you can surround yourself with in the real estate business are good people, right? Yeah. They're successful, they're honest, they're caring, they're giving, and it's so cool to see. I'm glad that was your experience as well. And if you went back, how would you reach out to people now? I know you said that you had a horrible written message, but for anyone who's thinking, okay, that's a great idea, I'm going to go on Bigger Pockets, how would you suggest that they reach out to someone?
Yeah, and it definitely, you can tweak it based on where you are in your real estate journey. But if I can go back exactly where I was, I would say something along the lines of, hey, insert their name. And one more thing too, I would look at their bio. I would read their bio, look at them, learn about them a little bit more, so I can throw in some personal touches in there as well. So maybe if I just want to research and network with people in my area, I'm in Orlando. So if I were to do that, hey Barry, I'm a new real estate investor in Orlando, and I saw and then say some things that they've either done or some things you're impressed by. I'm super impressed by your posts or your blog posts. I saw you somewhere. I would love to connect and learn more about you, or learn more about you and how I can help you out. Something along those lines of saying, hey, friendly, telling them how you heard about them, why you're reaching out to them, and just letting them know that you'd love to connect further. And I found that you'll get a pretty good success rate by doing that.
I think it's like that, like you explained that message, just being genuine as well, right? Just saying, hey, I'm just starting out, or I have one single family, whatever it is, right? And also, don't be asking and expecting too much for them. Hey, I want you to be on a deal with me. Let's put it on, whatever it is, right? Just reach out to them and ask them. And if you can do anything for them, if there's something in the bio, Joe Fearless talks about this. If there's something that you can do for them, if they have a podcast, go to their podcast, give them a 5-star rating and write them a review, and then write them and say, hey, I listened to your podcast. It's really cool. I enjoyed it. I gave you guys a 5-star rating and a writing review. I'm just starting out in my career. Is there any chance we can hop on a call? I got some questions that I want to ask. And then that
is perfect.
And then also when you hop on the call, make sure you have some good questions, right? Just don't be like, hey, what should I do in real estate? Or I heard real estate can make you money, right? Have some good questions. Read a little bit about, what they do or whatever, and ask them, like, if they're a multifamily syndicator, don't ask them about, hey, I want to be a fix and flipper, right? Well, right. That's not very good. You're wasting their time. You're wasting your own. But most, like we talked about, you shouldn't be scared. Just do it. And then at the end of the day, what's the worst that happened? They don't answer. Yeah, exactly. It's not like they're shutting the door slammed in your face or whatever, right? So yeah, I would encourage anyone to start that. But then from there, you start with Bigger Pockets. How have you grown your network from there?
So there were many things in between. From the networking perspective, one of the biggest things that I do now, and I try to tell everybody to do this because it's kind of like, oh wow, I can't believe I haven't been doing this. But if you listen to podcasts, which your listeners are listening to your show right now, so they listen to podcasts, right? After the episode, the biggest thing you need to do is reach out to the guest. Now, you listen to the podcast, which is great for you, right? You're consuming knowledge, and then what? You go do something else. Maybe you listen to another podcast, which is all great. And that's how I started. I just podcast. But then the biggest difference that I saw was at the end of every single podcast that I've listened to, the guest or the host asked the guest, where can the listeners find you? And people give their phone numbers, they give their emails, LinkedIn, like you name the platform, you can connect with anybody. So my biggest tip, and this is something that grew my network exponentially, was after each podcast episode, I would reach out to the guest in a very similar format to what we were talking about before. Hey, so-and-so, I just heard you on Barry's podcast, right? I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about blank. I would love to find some time and chat. And I have a few questions for you, something to get the conversation rolling, but it's really as simple as that. And again, the people that are going to answer, very high percentage. I normally reach out on LinkedIn, and I do that exact same process. Hey, just heard you on this podcast. And the amount of people that I've been able to network with from that is incredible. And just a quick story with that. I had a fellow young guy like me reach out to me and say, hey, I want to network with real estate investors. And I was like, all right, man, do it. He goes, all right, who can you introduce me to? And I said, who do you want to, what kind of person do you want to network with? And he just said, anybody. And I said, and it was kind of like this teach a man to fish or feed the man the fish kind of thing. And I'm happy to introduce anybody in my network. My network is an open book. But in this particular case with this person, I gave him the podcast tip because he said he listened to podcasts. He told me he listened to my podcast. I said, you're on the right track. You're listening to all the right people. You just need to take this little trick and just message them. And I actually got a message from him a few days ago saying, I had such a great conversation with him. Thank you so much. So this is real stuff. And like I said, I'm always happy to open my network, but if there's not a specific person or, type of person you want to connect with, the best thing you can do after you listen to a podcast, reach out. And from that, maybe they'll introduce you to somebody, or they're now your mutual friend. So you talk to someone else, you say, oh, I just spoke to so-and-so. And it's just the amount of the benefits that come out of it is, extraordinary.
Yeah. And I think what it is as well, as you talked about there, you teach a man a fish or you give him a fish, right? It's like also, I feel like along the same lines is that if they can't figure it out or aren't willing to do it themselves, they're never going to do it, right? You could do it, be like, hey, okay, let me introduce you to so-and-so. But what is that going to achieve? Are they going to stop at that one person and never network again, right? They've got to be willing to do it themselves, right? And that goes for everything in real estate, right? You could find someone a deal at one time, but if you're doing that for them every time, they're not going to do it themselves. And I found that to be true as well. They've got to want to do it for themselves, whatever that aspect is. And it's, applies to networking as well.
Right. And networking is such out of everything out there, it's the easiest thing to do that has the most amount of value. Like the value to easy ratio is priceless. I mean, it's as easy as, we're so lucky that we have social media. I'm not too old myself, but the amount of people that you're able to access through social media is something special. And I think that since a lot of us are used to social media, we don't really think about how powerful it is and how much access we truly have. But you have access to pretty much almost everybody that you want. There's a few people that maybe you're not gonna be able to reach just from a LinkedIn message, but I would say most people that you want to connect with is maybe 2 people away, so it's huge.
Yeah. And the cool thing about social media is as well, we're talking about providing value for people, right? Even if they don't have a podcast. If someone has an Instagram page, for example, if you go through and like all their pictures and comment on their pictures, that helps them grow that Instagram page, right? So you don't think those people will be appreciative if you took whatever, even if they have 100 photos, it might take you an hour, right? Maybe not even, to go through comment, like, that
Right.
provides value for that person. So when you reach out to that person again about doing something for that person, because that person's going to do something for you if they get on the call, they're going to give you knowledge, they're going to give you their time. So
Absolutely.
the thing you can do is give them something, right? It's not ass kissing or anything like that. It's doing the right thing. There's
Right.
two things are completely different, I think. And I think that's
it's adding value. And I think that a lot of the times people don't exactly say there's certain things that people don't always say that they need or want, which would add value to them. But just to let everyone know, something that I don't know anyone who wouldn't want: a podcast rating, a social media interaction, whether it's a comment, a like, a share. I mean, these, and the best part, they're completely free. It costs you nothing to like and comment and leave a review. Means, like I said, like the ratio of impact to, effort and as in this case, price. There's nothing that you can do that would mean more for the price and the energy that it takes than to leave a comment, follow them, interact with their stuff. I mean, for anybody out there, I think I'm speaking for every person on social media right now, that is valuable. Whether, if you ask them, hey, how can I add value to you? They might not say, hey, go like my messages or like my post, but that's one of those underlying things that everyone needs and wants.
Yeah. And it's thinking ahead, right? If you call someone up that's pretty successful and you're like, hey, what can I do for you? They might be like, I don't know. What can you, I have no idea. I'm thinking about 10,000 different things right now. I don't want to have to think about what you can do for me, right? And it's not being rude, but like, if you think ahead, and you don't have to be complicated. You don't have to think, 10 steps ahead. The most simplest thing, if they're on social media, do something for them on that social media platform. LinkedIn, social, Facebook, Instagram, or if they're on a podcast, it's even easier, right? Give them a 5-star rating and write them a great review. It's just as easy as that. And providing that value for them, it's so easy. And you're going to create your network. And just as you talk about, once you start building that network with people, you get into those circles and you surround yourself with successful people, right? And it's just, the comments, it's been said a million times, your network is your net worth, right?
Yep.
It's so true. You are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself the most, or whatever
right
that saying is. Because these people, they're successful. Just by them talking about their success, by giving you their mindset, their mentality, is just going to make you grow exponentially. It's just it's just unbelievable. How do you, so, you're reaching out to a ton of people, right? And I don't know if you still do it, or maybe you're at a point now that your network has grown so much that you don't do it so much. How do you maintain those relationships? How do you nurture those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I was going to make that point, because all of this is useless. I mean, it is worth absolutely nothing unless you do something with those people. So the typical thing is a CRM, which is the customer relations manager, fancy word, CRM. And there's free ones, there's paid ones, there's, you name it, it's out there. But what I was originally doing was using a system called Monday.com. Now, I don't necessarily recommend as a CRM tool. It's like a Excel sheet on steroids, but it's a great platform for other things. It's not really built for CRM, but that's what I was using it as originally. And I would set a reminder to circle back with everybody in 30 days. And I would take notes. This is another big thing. When you're on that call, jot down notes about them. If they say, oh, I just had a kid, write that down. If they said, I'm going on a vacation with my family to this place, write that down. Whatever they say is valuable. They're saying it because it's valuable to them. So if you can bring that up in a later conversation, that's going to be priceless. And they're going to be like, wow, this guy listens. Like, whoa. And I actually have an example with that. I was talking to a guy, and he's a disc golfer, and he told me he had X amount of hole-in-ones. So 30 days later, I messaged him and said, hey, how's everything going? Have you hit your 19th hole-in-one yet? And he was like, whoa, like it's the super small stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's the super small stuff that counts. But at the end of the day, it's important to have some type of system. I now am transferring over to an Excel sheet, which I'm testing out to see if that's going to be sufficient enough. But it's not really about the platform. You could really, there's millions of platforms out there. The main thing is write down things about them that you talked about, when you talk to them, and just stuff about them. It's all about them. If they talk about a pain point, write it down. And I found that 30 days, sometimes 45, maybe 60 days is a good amount of time. I think that in the beginning, when you're building the relationship, 30 days has worked for me pretty well. When it gets to that 45-day mark, 60-day mark, sometimes I'm scratching my head saying, who is this person?
Right.
But yeah, that CRM system is key. It's networking is nothing if you don't have it written down.
Yeah. There was recently, I think, a Bigger Pockets podcast about this. I think I can't remember. I remember kind of listening to it, and he was talking about the same thing, like using a CRM. And he said that the issue that he had, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, that's not genuine. That's not like organic. You're reminding yourself to reach out to someone." But the thing is, and he was saying, what does it matter? That person that you reach out to is not going to, oh, this guy reaches out to me every 30 days, so he must use a CRM, so it's not genuine, so I'm not going to reply. I don't want to talk to this. No, that person is happy that you reached out and talked to him, because if you probably don't use that CRM and you don't have that reminder, you'll forget, and you might not reply to that person again, right? You might not be in touch with that person, and you might not build that relationship with that person.
Yeah, I've had people reach out to me pretty recently too. I have a recent example, and it was an email. I had no idea who this guy was. I saw the name, and in the message, I could tell. Oh, I knew he knew about me, and I knew we must have talked before, because he said some things that I would talk about with somebody, right? And I just went to my CRM. I typed in his name, and I had, I think, 1 or 2 conversations with him, and a few sentences of notes saying this is where he lives, this is his profession, this is what we talked about. And I said, oh, this is so and so. And it was, if I did not have a CRM, and that's the other thing too, when you have a conversation with someone, you think, oh, I'm never going to forget this. Oh, he said this. I know that about him, right? I do that all the time. And I have these sticky notes that I take notes on conversations with. And that usually at the end of the day, I'll go ahead and put them in the CRM. But man, it is crucial. And especially when you're trying to build a big network and surround yourself by a lot of good people and just keep track of everybody. If you don't have a system in place, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's true. And then as you were thinking about it, something else that I found that helps is a couple of things that you can do. If you want to take a next step, is find out when their birthday is. Get them to give you their address, and then send them a birthday card. If they have a wife or kids, if you send their wife or kids a birthday card, and even a gift, a small gift, they're going to remember you, right? If you buy someone that's kid a gift or a birthday card, that's even more special than buying them, because obviously they love their kids so much. So that's another step you can do if you want to.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely next level. And I actually had a birthday column in my CRM.
Yeah.
I just never got to the point of using it.
Yeah.
But that's certainly next level, big stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit beforehand, and you mentioned that social media was something that you use, and that's the tool that you've been able to use. We talked a little bit about it, but tell us a little bit more about how you've been using social media.
Yeah, so there's so many different ways to look at social media. I was at a point in my life, a year ago, 2 years ago, I deleted social media. I said, this is such a waste. This is so stupid. And I know a lot of people who still think that now. There's people who love social media. But what I found out is social media is really what you make of it. So you're either reading a lot of stuff on social media, or you're posting a lot of stuff on social media, or you could be doing both. So I came to a point, and this was with early on, I didn't have a podcast. I was just learning about real estate, really. I started a meetup group, but I didn't really have anything to post. My most popular post was, what would you tell your younger self to do? Or something along those lines. And people went berserk on that post. Oh my, I would tell myself to start younger. And it was a great post, but it wasn't real estate focused really. So I didn't have anything to post. So I knew that I wanted to, one, be not just a consumer. I'm blanking on the word, but I wanted to add to social media as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, for people out there who don't have anything really to post right now, that is totally fine. Everyone starts at that point. The best thing you can do, as we kind of talked about before, is interact with other people. And that might even be better than posting, if I'm going to be honest. Interacting with other people. If you don't have anything to post, that's your thing. But yeah, what I've been posting mainly now is clips from my podcast. So I started a podcast, and the whole reason why I started it was I was learning so much. I felt selfish not to share it with anybody, but I knew that I didn't really have the credibility or all the knowledge to really share effectively. And don't get me wrong, I think anybody who learns something has something to share. And I knew I could definitely educate people, but I wanted to really, I didn't want to leave anything on the table. And I knew I'd be doing my friends, my family, anyone on my social network a disservice. And this was like serious. Like I didn't want to, hoard anything. I wanted to just put it all out there. So that's how the podcast started, where I had the idea, if I just bring professionals on and I just share it on social media, then it's fulfilling. I'm getting the information by talking to a professional. I'm sharing it with people, and I feel legit relieved that I'm not hiding this most valuable information, because I think real estate is the most fascinating thing. And, I can go on and on, but that was the first part of kind of the media part, where I wanted to share stuff with my followers. And again, if you don't have anything to post right now, liking, commenting, and then if you want to share stuff with your audience and you don't have any content really to produce, you can share other people's stuff as well. So that's another great way. If you don't have a podcast, if you don't have that much knowledge, if, whatever the case may be, and even if you do, I still share tons of things now, but starting off, I would say like and comment on other people's stuff and share. And then, yeah, sharing that information is so key.
Yeah. I think it's we're all on social media, right? That's what I realized. Like I've spent too much time on social media, just being honest, right? But I can be on there looking at, I don't know, cats doing stupid stuff, or like some sports stuff, or whatever it is, right? Or I can be looking at real estate stuff, people like yourself posting and liking and commenting on that and interacting, and helping that helps the algorithm with my account as well. So might as well be using that time to my advantage. Now I still look at the stupid stuff here and there, but it's you're balancing it out, because most of us, let's face it, most of us are on social media anyway. So you might as well be using some of that time to be productive. Yeah, yep. Exactly. I was going to get to your podcast, right? I think because I found with my podcast, it's been phenomenal. I loved every second of podcasting, which I didn't think was going to be the case beforehand. I was nervous. I was
right.
All kinds of limiting beliefs and negative self-talk about it and stuff, but it's been phenomenal. First of all, what's the name of your podcast, and where can people find it? I think that's important because it's a great podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Barry. The name is Real Estate Investing Made Simple, and you can really find that anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's how I actually found Bailey. Someone recommended his podcast, and I started listening. And I'm not saying this because you're on this call, but it's a really good podcast. And I can't remember who it was, but it was a really fascinating talk. It was really good. It was that good I've forgotten who it was.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But you took the thing that we were talking about earlier. You listened to a podcast and you reached out, right? And now we're building our relationship, and there's no price or value you can really put on something that's limitless, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're a perfect example of that. You listen to a podcast, you reached out, and now we're making it happen. And who knows what the future holds, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. What's been your favorite part about podcasting? You think is meeting people, is learning? What do you think has been the favorite part?
There are so many parts to it, as you know. I would say the number one thing is, if I had to pick one, wow. I would say being able to get on the phone with somebody for an hour and really ask them any questions. And I know we were talking about before, most people are open to, a 30-minute phone call, a 15-minute phone call. Sure, an hour phone call too. But something about a podcast where you're not only able to have that conversation, but you're able to share it with other people, gets people even more intrigued to have that conversation in the first place. So I think that's the most valuable part. And then of course, being the host and same thing with you, being able to be the one to ask those questions definitely gives yourself, you create the questions and you kind of build that relationship, which is huge. But for the people who don't have a podcast, the main thing, the craziest, I heard someone explain it this way, is I think everyone talks about, getting in a room with like Bill Gates and all these really successful people and hearing them talk. Because to be honest, if you're going to be in a room with somebody super, super successful, you probably don't want to be doing the talking anyways, right? You probably want to hear what they have to say, ask some questions, but you're kind of in learning mode when you're listening to other people, especially people that you look up to, right? So not having a podcast is not necessarily a bad thing at all, because you're able to hear conversations as if you were in the same room as people. I mean, people are literally watching this. So that's the only difference is they're not asking the questions, right? But they're still getting the value of the answers and the knowledge, which is a huge piece of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. For people listening to podcasts, they get to be in the room with that person, basically, right? It's that
Right.
It's a conversation. It's a conversation about real estate. It's a conversation about how they've been successful. It's a conversation about what they've done. And you get to be a part of that. You sit in on that conversation, even though you don't get to answer the questions. But it's funny you say that about podcasting. That's my favorite part as well, because I listen to podcasts and just like yourself, and I enjoy it. But I never get to ask the question, because there's always times where someone talks about something. I'm like, oh, ask them this. Come on, ask them this. It's so obvious. And then they don't ask them. And that's fine.
Right.
That's their prerogative, right? It's their show. It's their questions.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be the one asking the questions, because I want to know the answers to the things that pop up into my head.
Right. But the other beauty of it as well, I'm totally with you. I enjoy asking the questions because I'm asking the questions that I want to ask, right? But the beauty of it, and this ties into what we were talking about before, if you didn't hear a question that you wanted answered, wait till the end of the episode, find out they're going to tell you their email. They're going to tell you something about how to get them. Hop on the phone and ask them that question. So at the end of the day, there's really, you have the access to ask the questions. Maybe not in that immediate moment, but if you have a burning question, rewind this episode and hear the part where we were talking about reaching out after the episode, and you'll get every question you really want answered.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. That might be a good way actually for people to network, because if you paid attention enough and you have a question that much, that means you're really interested in that, you're really into real estate. So if you reach out to them and say, hey, I listened to your great podcast with so-and-so, when he asked you about this, it triggered another question in my brain, and I wanted to ask you about this. I was wondering if you had a second to answer this question. It would be great if you did. And you don't think that you're going to grab that person's attention with that? That person will be, wow, who is this person? So that's a great tip there. I never thought of that before, but that's a great tip there.
For sure.
For people wanting to. And I think what it does as well is, just like you said earlier, is gives you that chance to talk to people that might not. They'll give you the time of the day, but they might not, right? And
it's different.
It definitely is different, right? I get to speak to all these people, and I don't feel like I'm asking them for something the same, right? Because hopefully this platform, they might get an investor, or they might get someone that does a deal with them, or they get something out of it, right? There's the opportunity of that. But if it's just me and that person, they're just giving to me. You know, if we just get on a phone call, it's just him and me, and he's just being nice to me. And I'm sure a lot of people will, but it's so much easier to be like, hey, can you be on my podcast? You know, I'm on YouTube, I'm on iTunes or whatever. Can you be on it? You know, I've got an audience, and then you get to have that conversation, and it's phenomenal. It's like, today, you know, you're my second interview today, and this is like the second podcast I'm listening to, but I'm interacting with, you know? It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I always encourage people, anyone I speak to, is to start a podcast. Whether you think people will listen or not, just start, and you'll be surprised how far you'll get. You'll be surprised. Like, I started in August of this year, and we're in November 4th now. And I'm so surprised by how much value I've gotten from meeting people like yourself, to connections, to stuff happening. You know, it's just unbelievable how much podcasting helps.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the big things that hold people back, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but there are a lot of real estate podcasts out there, and that's okay, because the fact of the matter is, at least in my network, from my family, my friends from back home, all that type of thing, most people are in the stock market, but most of those people are not in real estate. So there might be a lot of podcasts, or, you know, you might not get 1,000 listeners your first day, but that's not really what matters. First of all, you're able to share stuff with your audience that you already have, because trust me, plenty of them have not heard about real estate investing. I know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. So that's such a big part. And then the second thing is too, a lot of the people that I just talk with, whether it's other friends, whoever it may be, they don't necessarily listen to my podcast, but they're like, you're doing something in real estate. When they start associating you with real estate, I see you're doing something with real estate. I want to learn more. That's really what gets the ball rolling. So, you know, at first I was like, do I care how many listeners do I have? Do I care about, you know, what am I really trying to accomplish? At the end of the day, it's adding value. And when you add enough value, people notice. And even if they don't reach out to you, you'll see them one day at the park, at the mall, wherever it may be. And they'll be like, how's everything going with the real estate? And then just from having endless benefits, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I heard someone else say one time, as much podcasts as we think that are out there because we listen to podcasts, there really isn't. And most people haven't heard of a real estate podcast. You know, the people outside of our real estate bubble, most of them haven't never listened to a real estate podcast. So if you start one up, and the people in your bubble, that's in your sphere around you, if they just listen to yours, that'll be enough for you to have a good base to start off with anyway. So it's
for sure.
Yeah. What's next for you, man? You know, I'm sure you got some big plans, but what's next for you think?
Yeah, I mean, getting into my first deal is the first focus that the next step that I need to take. So right now I am doing a few different things to kind of get the wheel spinning. So I'm part of a mastermind group, which has been the biggest accelerator of growth so far for me. And through that, just underwriting deals, networking, there's just people, it's just kind of having that access to people with all the different pieces that we were talking about in the beginning of the show. You know, you need money, you need deals, you need boots on the ground. So being in a group has given myself the opportunity to find those different puzzle pieces. And I'm kind of in the process of seeing, what piece do I want to fill? Do I want to raise capital? Do I want to underwrite the deals? And I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything right now. I'm underwriting a lot of deals with people in the group, from the podcast and from networking. You know, people reach out, they want to invest, that type of thing. So there's a bunch of different avenues. And I know people preach, focus on one thing, do one thing. And I totally agree. But for just starting out, and this is for people just starting out, you don't necessarily know what you want to do. And I think where I'm at right now of kind of exploring the many different aspects of it is super beneficial. And I don't see myself having any regrets of trying to just touch a few of them, because once I find the one that I like the best and maybe that I'm the best at, that's the one I'll run with and stick with. But, for just getting started and people out there as well, don't be afraid to learn a little bit about everything, because I think that's going to serve you well in the long run as well.
Yeah, I think it helps because you need to have some kind of knowledge of all aspects of it, right? Even though you're going to usually try and be an expert in one facet of it, you want to understand all of the picture and understand what goes into all of it. So I think that's important. So this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, right? So I like to ask some wrestling-themed real estate questions. So on this show. So the first one I like to ask is, what would your wrestling name be? If you had to pick a wrestling name for yourself, what would it be?
Yeah, I love that question. I would say my wrestling name would be BK SmackDown. BK is my initials, so I think that works perfectly. SmackDown. That I think that fits right into the wrestling theme. So the BK SmackDown.
BK SmackDown. Okay, I think you should change your podcast to that name now. BK SmackDown. That's awesome. Every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move in real estate?
Yeah, I think my special move, and something that I'm always developing, and I know we touched on networking, so I'm going to say networking, but the other thing I want to touch on too is systems. So building systems, creating systems, finding systems from other people, that is not only, I think you called it the superpower.
Yes, right. Special move, yeah.
Special move, yeah. I think that is the special move. That should be the special move for everything anyone does ever. And once I learned about what a system was, and I kept on doing these repeated tasks over and over again, I realized the importance of it. And so I would say putting systems in place for everything you do would be it.
You're a wise head on young shoulders for sure, man. I love it. That's so true. Yeah, systematize everything if you can. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate career?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is limiting beliefs. I think that it's something that everyone faces at one point or another. I would be shocked if someone woke up and said, I can invest in a 100-unit apartment complex. It's not typical. And I don't think that happens for anybody. I think there's always limiting beliefs that come in people's way. And for me, it started as the age thing, because when I started reaching out to people, I was 19, and I thought I had the biggest disadvantage. I had all these limiting beliefs, but I found that I think it's actually an advantage. And there's no status quo for real estate investing, because when you think to yourself, I'm too young. Okay, what's the perfect age to get started in investing? There's really not. The best answer would be as soon as possible. But there's not an age. There's not a number. You have to be this or that. So I would say limiting beliefs was the biggest smackdown, and definitely from talking to people and self-discovery definitely helped crush those limiting beliefs.
Yeah. I think we all have those limiting beliefs. It's something that we all fight, Was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I would say the biggest moment like that was, it was honestly a few moments. And it started when, back to my education, I'm always in education mode, but my initial education stage where I was learning about single family, and I was kind of like, okay, I think I really understand this enough. I'm ready to jump. And then the thing that held me back was it was partially shiny object syndrome, but it was also partially, I just was brand new. I didn't know anything. So I think that point where I was like, I can do single family, and then should I go into this? Wait, there's a duplex. Wait, I'm ready to go into it. Try, and then in that learning stage, and I'm really not upset that I haven't taken that jump to just buy a single family house just for the heck of it. I think that the experience that I've had so far with just education, networking with people in the multifamily space has been super valuable. Not that it'd be wrong or I wouldn't be successful if I were to just take that jump initially and just buy a single family home. But at the end of the day, I had time to discover what I really wanted for myself. So I would say those were the biggest parts where I was learning and it was like shiny object syndrome left and right.
I've had that shiny object syndrome. It's very, very real because everything can sound so good, right? You listen to a podcast and the guy's doing tax liens and he's made millions and he 1 hour a month and he, you know, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why am I not doing this? And then, but you can waste so much time with that. I found like, oh, I did myself personally. You just got to try and, you know, find one thing and stick to it and learn that as best as you can because that'll
absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Well, Bailey, thank you so much, man. It's been such an awesome interview. It really is a high energy, fun guy to talk to. Really enjoyed it. You know, talking about your experiences, how you got started and found real estate to, you know, the networking component. I think there's actionable tips for everyone today. Whatever you are in your real estate career, those networking tips are phenomenal because, you know, if we have to say it once, we'll say it 1,000 times. The network is so important. You can grow so much more, so much bigger with a great network, right? That's so
absolutely.
And the social media aspect of everything that you do, and the podcast, of course, that has been huge. So I appreciate you sharing that with everyone today. I'm sure everyone's learned a lot. I know I have for sure, and some things I definitely will take away from today's conversation. But before we go, where can people find out more? And if someone wants to reach out to you after the podcast, right, like we talked about, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, Barry, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciated it, and you know, loved our conversation. So for those wanting to reach out, please reach out. You know, nothing I'd like more, and nothing that you can do more actionable and guarantee a response. You know, from what we just talked about in this episode. So the best way to reach me is LinkedIn. And one quick tip with LinkedIn, when you connect with me and reach out, please just throw in a little message where you heard of me, because sometimes I get people get requests and you're like, I don't know who this person is, but throw in just a little note. Hey, I heard you on Barry's podcast. Boom, let's have a phone call, right? So LinkedIn's the main way, and yeah, find me on there.
LinkedIn. Remind us what your podcast is called again.
Yeah, Real Estate Investing Made Simple.
And do you have a social media related to that?
Yeah, you can really just find me on, there's no podcast related to social media, but I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram,
cool.
You know, some YouTube stuff. So, you know, I'd love to connect with your audience on the personal basis, and the best way to reach out is LinkedIn, but cool. You know, research me on a platform, and I'm sure I'm on there, except Twitter.
Follow him on Instagram. I'll put all the links in the description below so that everyone can find you there. So that's perfect. Cool, man. And I appreciate you saying that. It's been a lot of fun. I really, really genuinely appreciate you giving us the time today. And I really enjoyed the conversation. That was awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again, Barry.